The rattlesnake's rattle echoed through the silent street as Harmony Rowe stepped from the general store, causing the townsfolk to scatter like autumn leaves in a windstorm, their whispers following her down the dusty main street of Kennewick, Wyoming Territory, in 1878. Their fear was as tangible as the dry summer heat that shimmered above the road, but Harmony had grown accustomed to their superstitions and the wide berth they gave her whenever she ventured into town. The cursed woman, they called her, though never to her face. Her crime: being the sole survivor of a mysterious fever that had claimed her entire family 3 years prior. The narrow-minded residents of Kennewick believed she had somehow cheated death by making a deal with the devil, bringing misfortune upon anyone who showed her kindness. Harmony adjusted the basket on her arm, filled with the few supplies Mr. Jenkins had reluctantly sold her, charging twice the normal price as if compensating for the bad luck her patronage might bring. At 22, she had grown accustomed to this treatment, though it never ceased to wound her. The isolation was perhaps the cruelest aspect, living alone in her family's small homestead, a mile outside town, working the land by herself, with only her memories and determination for company. She kept her head high as she walked, her chestnut hair tucked neatly beneath a faded bonnet, her dress simple but clean. Harmony had taught herself to ignore the stares, the crossing of fingers, the muttered prayers as she passed. What choice did she have? This was her home, the only one she'd ever known, and she refused to be driven away by ignorance and fear. As she approached her wagon, the sound of commotion drew her attention to the far end of the street. A cloud of dust announced the arrival of riders, and moments later, a small group of cowboys thundered into town. Leading them was a man Harmony had never seen before, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a strong jawline partially concealed by several days' worth of stubble. Unlike most strangers who rode into Kennewick, he didn't seem to be looking for the saloon or the sheriff's office. Instead, he reined his horse to a stop directly in front of the town's only doctor's building, dismounting with an urgency that spoke of trouble. Harmony hesitated. She should return home. Daylight was burning, and she had chores to complete before dark. But something about the stranger's demeanor kept her rooted in place, watching as he and another man carried a third between them, a younger cowboy whose leg was wrapped in a bloody makeshift bandage. "Snake bite," she heard someone say, and her interest was piqued further. If there was one thing Harmony knew, it was treating snake bites. Her father had been a skilled healer, and she had inherited both his knowledge and his small collection of medical books. She debated with herself for only a moment before securing her basket in her wagon and walking purposefully toward the doctor's office. The town's physician, Dr. Whitaker, was competent enough with broken bones and delivering babies, but when it came to snake venom, his methods were outdated and often ineffective. The men had disappeared inside by the time she reached the building. Taking a deep breath, Harmony pushed open the door and stepped into the dimly lit anteroom. Dr. Whitaker's voice carried from the back room, tense and uncertain. "I can amputate, but with the venom spread this far." "There has to be another way," insisted a deep voice, the lead rider, she presumed. "He's just a kid, Doc, barely 19. Harmony cleared her throat, causing all heads to turn in her direction. The reaction was immediate. Dr. Whitaker's face darkened, and his assistant took a protective step in front of the medicine cabinet. "Miss Rowe," the doctor said stiffly, "we're dealing with an emergency. Whatever supplies you need will have to wait." The lead cowboy looked between them, confusion evident in his strikingly blue eyes. Harmony couldn't help but notice, even in the dim light. "I didn't come for supplies," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. "I came to help. A disbelieving laugh escaped the doctor. "Help. No offense, miss, but I think we've had quite enough of your kind of help in this town." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Her kind of help?" No one answered him directly. Harmony took another step forward. "My father treated snake bites successfully for years before he died. I know his methods." She glanced at the young man on the examination table, his face ashen and sweaty. "Rattlesnake, I assume. How long ago?" "About 2 hours," the lead cowboy answered before the doctor could protest. "We were mending fence on the north range of the Quinn ranch when it happened." "Rode as fast as we could." Harmony nodded. "There's still time then." She moved toward the patient, ignoring the doctor's sputtering objections. "Now see here, Miss Rowe, I cannot allow you to interfere with my patient. Your presence alone is disruptive." The stranger's gaze sharpened. "Disruptive? This boy is dying and she seems to know something about snake bites. I'd call that the opposite of disruptive." "You don't understand, Mr. Quinn," the doctor hissed. "This woman is Quentin," the stranger interrupted, addressing Harmony directly. "Quentin Quinn. I bought the old Morrison place 6 months ago." He extended a hand, and after a moment of shock, no one in Kennewick had willingly touched her in years, Harmony shook it. "Harmony Rowe," she replied, noting how warm and calloused his palm felt against hers. "Now that we're acquainted," Quentin said with a pointed look at the doctor, "maybe you can help my ranch hand before he loses his leg or worse." Harmony approached the examination table, where the young cowboy's pant leg had been cut away to reveal 2 puncture wounds surrounded by angry, swollen flesh. She assessed the bite with practiced eyes. "The venom hasn't reached his heart yet, but it's close," she said. "I need yarrow root, echinacea, and willow bark, and clean hot water." When no one moved, she looked up, her gaze locking with Quentin's. "Please." To her surprise, he nodded without hesitation. "Doc, where do you keep those things?" the doctor sputtered. "Mr. Quinn, I must protest. This woman has no medical training. She's considered by many in this town to be what?" Quentin demanded. An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, the doctor's assistant whispered, "Cursed, sir. They say she's cursed." Quentin stared at them for a long moment before throwing his head back in laughter. "Cursed? Good God, what century is this?" He shook his head and turned to the medicine cabinet. "Yarrow root, you said. And what else?" "Echinacea and willow bark," Harmony repeated, her chest tight with emotion. It had been so long since anyone had taken her side, trusted her judgment, or even spoken to her with basic respect. The young cowboy moaned, drawing her attention back to the urgent task. As Quentin and one of his men gathered the supplies she requested, Harmony began cleaning the wound, speaking softly to the boy to keep him conscious. "What's your name?" she asked. "Tommy," he managed through clenched teeth. "Tommy Lewis." "You're going to be all right, Tommy," she assured him. "The bite is nasty, but we've caught it in time." Over the next hour, Harmony worked diligently, applying a poultice of the herbs ground together with a mortar and pestle, instructing Quentin and his men to hold Tommy down when the pain became too intense for the boy to remain still. She administered a tincture of willow bark for the fever and pain, and repeatedly cleaned the wound, working the venom out as her father had taught her. Dr. Whitaker observed from the corner, his expression a mixture of skepticism and reluctant curiosity. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the office window, Tommy's fever had broken, and the swelling around the bite had noticeably decreased. "He'll need rest," Harmony said, washing her hands in a basin of water. "And the poultice should be changed every few hours. The danger has passed, but recovery will take time." Quentin studied her with undisguised admiration. "You saved his leg, probably his life." Harmony shrugged, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. I only did what my father would have done. Your father must have been a remarkable man." "He was," she said softly, "a healer by nature, though never formally trained." Dr. Whitaker cleared his throat. "While I must admit your herbal remedy appears effective, Miss Rowe, I would advise against spreading the notion that you possess medical knowledge. It could give people ideas." The implication was clear. The town already thought her dangerous, claiming healing abilities would only fuel their suspicions of witchcraft. Quentin's jaw tightened. "Ideas like maybe she knows what she's talking about. Heaven forbid." He turned to Harmony. "Thank you for what you did today." "I won't forget it." Harmony nodded, gathering her things. "I should get home before dark." She hesitated. "If you'd like, I could prepare more of the tincture for Tommy. It will help with the pain as he heals." "I'd appreciate that," Quentin said. "In fact, I'll escort you home and then come back for Tommy when he's stable enough to move to the ranch." Alarm flickered across her face. "That's not necessary." I insist," he said firmly. "It's getting dark and I'd like to know more about these healing skills of yours." His eyes twinkled. "Besides, it seems I need to understand why the good people of Kennewick are so afraid of a woman who just saved my ranch hand's life." Despite her misgivings about allowing anyone near her home, her sanctuary Harmony found herself nodding. There was something about Quentin Quinn that made her want to trust him, despite years of learning not to trust anyone in this town. Half an hour later, with Tommy resting more comfortably under Dr. Whitaker's grudging care, Harmony found herself seated beside Quentin on the bench of her wagon, his horse tethered behind. The main street was nearly deserted as they drove through, but the few people still about stopped and stared openly at the sight of the cursed woman with Kennewick's newest ranch owner. "They're looking at us like we're part of a traveling circus," Quentin remarked, seemingly amused rather than concerned. "They're worried for you," Harmony said quietly. "By this time tomorrow, someone will have warned you about the dangers of associating with me." He glanced sideways at her. "And what dangers might those be, according to town lore? Death, destruction, crop failure, livestock disease, take your pick." She kept her eyes on the road ahead. 3 years ago, a fever swept through my family's homestead. My parents, my 2 younger brothers, even our farmhand all dead within a week. I was the only survivor." "I'm sorry," Quentin said, his voice gentle. "That's a terrible loss." "It was," she agreed. "But to Kennewick, the tragedy wasn't that I lost my family, it was that I didn't die with them. They decided there had to be a reason I survived when everyone else perished. And in a town where most people still nail horseshoes above their doors to ward off evil spirits, the explanation was simple. I made a deal with the devil." "That's absurd," he said flatly. "Is it?" She turned to look at him, her expression challenging. "How do you explain it then? Why did I survive when everyone else died? Some people are naturally resistant to certain illnesses, or perhaps you had a milder case. There are rational explanations that don't involve supernatural pacts." Harmony couldn't help but smile at his matter-of-fact tone. "You sound like my father. He had little patience for superstition. Smart man. I wish I could have met him." As they left the town behind, the rutted dirt road wound through stands of cottonwood trees and across a small creek before emerging on the rolling grassland where Harmony's modest homestead stood. The 2-room cabin and small barn looked lonesome against the vast Wyoming sky, but Harmony had worked hard to maintain the place, and despite its simplicity, it was neat and well kept. She drew the wagon to a halt in front of the cabin. "This is me," she said unnecessarily. Quentin jumped down and came around to help her, offering his hand. Again, Harmony was struck by the casual way he touched her, as if the town's warnings meant nothing to him. As she stepped down, Their bodies came closer than she had been to another human being in years, and she caught the scent of leather and sunshine on his skin. "It's getting late," she said, taking a step back. "If you want that tincture for Tommy, I can prepare it now." Quentin nodded, looking around the homestead with interest. "You maintain all this yourself?" "Yes, it's not much, but it's mine." While Harmony worked at her kitchen table, grinding herbs and mixing the tincture, Quentin built up the fire in her stove and filled her water bucket from the well outside, simple acts of kindness that nearly brought tears to her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had done anything to make her life easier. "How long have you been alone here?" he asked as she corked the small bottle of medicine. "3 years since the fever." She handed him the bottle. "2 drops in water 3 times a day. It's bitter, but it works." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Harmony felt a strange flutter in her chest. She quickly withdrew her hand. "Thank you," Quentin said, studying the amber liquid. "Though I should be the one giving you something, you saved Tommy today." Harmony shrugged. "I'm glad I could help." Quentin pocketed the bottle and looked at her thoughtfully. "You know, I've been looking for someone with knowledge of local plants and remedies. The ranch hands are always getting themselves cut up, bruised, or worse. Would you consider sharing more of your father's knowledge? I'd pay you fairly for your time and any medicines you prepare." The offer stunned her. "Mr. Quinn, Quentin, please." "Quentin," she amended. "I don't think you understand what you're asking. Anyone you hire from town would refuse to work alongside me. Your business in Kennewick would suffer. People might even refuse to sell to you or buy from you. Because you're cursed." He made no attempt to hide his skepticism. "Miss Rowe Harmony, I grew up in Boston with a father who believed in science and reason above all else. I don't put stock in curses or hexes or any such nonsense. What I do believe in is skill, and you have it." He gestured to the bottle in his pocket. "You have knowledge that can help people, that saved Tommy today. That's worth more to me than the superstitious ramblings of a backward town." Harmony wanted to believe him. More than anything, she wanted to think that someone this handsome, confident man with kind eyes could see her as something other than a pariah, a curiosity, or a danger. But 3 years of isolation had taught her caution. "Let's see how Tommy does," she suggested. "If your men don't revolt at the idea of medicine made by the cursed woman, then perhaps we can discuss an arrangement." Quentin smiled, and Harmony was struck by how it transformed his already handsome face. "Fair enough. I'll return in a few days to let you know how he's faring." He left shortly after, and Harmony stood in her doorway watching until his figure disappeared into the gathering darkness. Only then did she allow herself to acknowledge the warm feeling spreading through her chest, hope, tentative but unmistakable. True to his word, Quentin returned 3 days later, bringing news that Tommy was recovering well and had already regained some strength in his injured leg. He came bearing gifts: coffee, sugar, and a book of poetry that he'd ordered from back east months ago, but hadn't found time to read. "I thought you might enjoy it," he said almost shyly as he handed her the leather-bound volume. "The evenings must get long out here alone." Harmony ran her fingers over the embossed cover, touched beyond words. Books were precious, and no one had given her a gift of any kind since her family died. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "This is very kind." Quentin stayed for dinner, insisting on helping her prepare the simple meal of rabbit stew and cornbread. As they ate, he told her about his life, how he'd grown up the son of a successful shipping magnate in Boston, attended university, and then shocked his family by announcing he wanted to go west and raise cattle rather than join the family business. "My father thought I'd lost my mind," he said with a chuckle. He was convinced I'd be scalped by Indians or shot by outlaws within a month. And yet here you are, 3 years later. I spent 2 years learning the business on other ranches before buying my own place. The Morrison spread had good water rights and decent grazing land, even if the buildings needed work. He took a bite of cornbread. What about you? Have you always lived in Kennewick? Harmony nodded. My parents came here when I was a baby. My father was sought after for his healing skills, especially by the ranchers whose spreads were too far from town to fetch the doctor easily. Her smile turned sad. It's ironic. When he was alive, people traveled for miles to seek his help. Now they cross the street to avoid his daughter. People fear what they don't understand, Quentin said, and grief makes them irrational. They needed something to blame for the tragedy, and you were the convenient target. Perhaps, but knowing that doesn't make the isolation any easier to bear. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, a current of understanding that made Harmony's heart beat faster. Quentin Quinn was unlike anyone she'd ever met, and his presence in her home, his interest in her life and skills, awakened feelings she'd long thought dead. Before he left that evening, he renewed his offer to have her prepare medicines for his ranch. Not just for emergencies, he clarified. Regular supplies, salves for cuts and burns, tinctures for pain and fever, anything you think would be useful for a bunch of cowboys who are constantly finding new ways to injure themselves. This time, Harmony agreed. She needed the income, but more than that, she craved the purpose it would give her to use her knowledge to help others again, as her father had done. Over the weeks that followed, Quentin visited regularly, sometimes bringing one of his men to collect the latest batch of medicines, other times coming alone. Each visit lasted longer than the last, and Harmony found herself looking forward to them with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. They developed a comfortable routine. Quentin would bring news from town and supplies she couldn't easily obtain herself, and Harmony would share more of her knowledge of plants and healing. Sometimes they would ride out together to gather herbs, Harmony pointing out useful plants along the creek banks and in the meadows surrounding her homestead. During one such expedition in late summer, they dismounted to collect goldenrod flowers along the banks of a small tributary. The day was warm, the sky a perfect Wyoming blue dotted with puffy white clouds. As Harmony worked, she became aware of Quentin watching her rather than gathering plants himself. "What is it?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Do I have something on my face?" "No," he said softly. "I was just thinking how different you look when you're working with plants. You come alive in a way I don't see at other times." Harmony felt heat rise to her cheeks. "My father used to say that plants don't judge or hold grudges. They simply are what they are, and they offer their gifts to anyone who understands them." Wise man. Quentin moved closer, taking the basket of flowers from her hands and setting it aside. "Harmony, there's something I need to tell you," her heart stuttered. "Yes. I've been offered a partnership in a larger ranch operation near Cheyenne. The owner is getting on in years and has no sons. He wants someone younger to help manage the place, with the understanding that I'd eventually take over completely." "Oh." Harmony felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity for you." "It is," he agreed. "The Circle T is 3 times the size of my place, with better grazing land and a more established herd." She forced a smile. "When would you leave?" "That depends." He took her hands in his expression serious. "Harmony, these past months getting to know you have been the best of my life. You're brilliant and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. The idea of leaving Kennewick without you is unthinkable." Harmony stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, and I'm asking you to come with me to the Circle T, not as my employee or friend, but as my wife." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Quentin, you can't mean that." "You know what people say about me." "I know what a bunch of superstitious fools say," he corrected her gently. "I also know what I've seen with my own eyes, a remarkable woman who has endured unimaginable loss and cruelty without becoming bitter or hateful." He touched her cheek. "You're not cursed, Harmony. If anything, anyone who earns your love would be blessed beyond measure." A sob escaped her. For 3 years, she had lived with the weight of the town's judgment, had begun to wonder if perhaps they were right, that there was something wrong with her, something that had allowed her to survive when her family perished. Quentin's words were like rain on parched earth, seeping into the cracks of her wounded soul. "I love you too," she whispered, the words both terrifying and liberating. "But Quentin, are you sure? This isn't something you can undo. If we marry, you tie yourself to my reputation forever." "Good thing we're leaving Kennewick then," he said with a smile, drawing her closer. "In Cheyenne, no one will know or care about these ridiculous superstitions. We can start fresh." Just like that, hope bloomed in her chest. Just like that. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Say yes, Harmony. Say you'll be my wife." Instead of answering with words, Harmony rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then grew deeper as Quentin's arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his eyes dancing. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." The news of their engagement spread through Kennewick like wildfire. The reactions were predictably divided. Quentin's ranch hands, who had benefited from Harmony's medicines and seen nothing but positive results, offered congratulations. Tommy Lewis, fully recovered from his snake bite, was particularly enthusiastic, declaring loudly in the general store that Miss Rowe ain't cursed. "She's the reason I still got 2 legs." The townspeople, however, were horrified. Delegations of concerned citizens visited the Quinn ranch, trying to dissuade Quentin from what they saw as a fatal mistake. The local preacher even came, Bible in hand, to warn him about the dangers of allying himself with a woman marked by unnatural survival. Quentin listened politely to each visitor, before showing them the door with increasingly firm suggestions about what they could do with their opinions. His steadfast defense of Harmony only strengthened her love for him and her certainty that leaving Kennewick was the right decision. They were married on a crisp October morning by a justice of the peace from the next county over, as Kennewick's own magistrate had politely declined. The ceremony took place on Harmony's homestead, with only Quentin's ranch hands in attendance. Tommy served as best man, proudly standing on his healed leg. As Harmony and Quentin exchanged vows beneath the golden leaves of the cottonwood trees her father had planted, she felt a sense of peace settling over her. The ghosts of her family seemed to linger nearby, not in sorrow but in blessing, as she promised herself to this man who had seen her true self when everyone else saw only superstition and fear. The wedding feast was simple but joyful, with music provided by one of the cowhands who played a passable fiddle. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, Quentin pulled Harmony aside. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, leading her to the small barn where her single milk cow and 2 horses were kept. Inside, he pointed to a wooden chest she'd never seen before. "Go on," he encouraged. "Open it." Harmony lifted the lid to find the chest filled with glass bottles and jars, mortars and pestles of different sizes, scales, and other equipment for preparing medicines, all of it new and of much finer quality than the makeshift tools she'd been using. "Quentin," she breathed, running her fingers over a beautifully crafted pestle made of polished marble. "These must have cost a fortune." "Worth every penny," he assured her. "I wrote to a medical supply company in Denver. This is just the beginning. When we get to the Circle T, I want to build you a proper workroom where you can continue your father's legacy of healing." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use these to help people," he said, taking her hands in his. "The Circle T is even more remote than my place here. The nearest doctor is in Cheyenne. A good half-day's ride. The ranch hands and their families, the neighboring homesteaders, they could all benefit from your knowledge. You want me to practice healing openly." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying after years of hiding her skills. "I want you to be who you were meant to be," Quentin said simply. "Not the cursed woman of Kennewick, but Harmony Quinn, healer." They left for Cheyenne 3 days later, traveling in a small caravan with their personal possessions, Harmony's animals, and the 2 ranch hands who had elected to make the move with them. Quentin had sold his ranch to a cattle company from Montana, using the proceeds to buy into the Circle T partnership. As their wagons crested the final hill outside of Kennewick, Harmony looked back at the town that had been her home for all of her 22 years. Despite the pain and isolation she had endured there, she felt a pang of sadness at leaving the land her parents had worked, the place where they were buried. "We can turn back if you want," Quentin said softly, noting her expression. "Your homestead is still yours. We could make it work." She shook her head. "No, there's nothing for us there anymore." She reached for his hand. "My future is with you, wherever that takes us." He squeezed her fingers, and together they turned their faces toward the horizon, toward Cheyenne and the promise of a new beginning. The Circle T Ranch sprawled across thousands of acres of prime grazing land, 20 miles outside of Cheyenne. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of sturdy pine, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Outbuildings included a bunkhouse for the dozen or so ranch hands, a cookhouse, stables, and various barns and storage sheds. The owner, Harold Thompson, was a gruff man in his 60s with a weather-beaten face and hands gnarled from decades of ranch work. He greeted Quentin warmly, having already formed a favorable impression during their previous meetings to discuss the partnership. His reception of Harmony was more reserved, though not unkind. "Quentin tells me you have a way with medicinal herbs," he said as he showed them around the main house. "My late wife had some skill in that area too. Saved more than one cowboy from infection after the doctor in town gave up on them." It was a small opening, but Harmony recognized it for what it was: an acknowledgement that her skills might be useful, valuable even, on a ranch this size where injuries were common and medical care distant. "I'd be happy to prepare some basics to keep on hand," she offered. "Salves for cuts and burns, tinctures for pain and fever, that sort of thing." Harold nodded. "Appreciate that. And there's a room off the kitchen my Sarah used to use for her herbs and such. Been closed up since she passed 5 years ago, but it's yours if you want it." Harmony exchanged a glance with Quentin, who smiled encouragingly. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'd like that very much." Life at the Circle T quickly settled into a rhythm. Quentin threw himself into learning every aspect of the larger operation, working alongside Harold and the ranch hands from dawn until dusk. Harmony managed the household, explored the surrounding land for useful plants, and set up her workroom in the space that had once belonged to Sarah Thompson. The ranch hands, initially wary of the new boss's young wife, gradually warmed to her as she treated their ailments without fuss or judgment. Word of her skills spread, and soon homesteaders from miles around were finding reasons to stop by the Circle T when they or their children were ill. Harold watched these developments with quiet approval. One evening, as Harmony was treating a ranch hand's badly infected thumb that might otherwise have required amputation, the old rancher observed from the doorway of her workroom. "You remind me of Sarah," he said when the cowboy had left, his hand poulticed and bandaged. "She had the same gentle touch, the same confidence with plants and remedies." Quentin mentioned she was skilled with herbs, Harmony replied, cleaning her instruments. "I would have liked to learn from her." "She would have liked you," Harold said with certainty. "And she would have been pleased to see her workroom being used again." He hesitated. "The folks in town, they never understood her ways. Called her a witch behind her back because she could heal what their doctors couldn't explain." Harmony stilled. "Did they?" Harold nodded. "People fear what they don't understand, but out here, results matter more than superstition. A man who can ride again after everyone said he'd be crippled doesn't much care if you use doctor's medicine or witch's brew to make it happen." She smiled at that. "In Kennewick, they called me cursed. And here, no one has called me anything but Mrs. Quinn or Madam, as it should be." Harold tipped his hat. "Well, good night, Mrs. Quinn. That boy would have lost his thumb if not for you. Remember that next time you hear whispers." As winter settled over Wyoming, Harmony found herself happier than she'd been since before her family died. Her marriage to Quentin deepened with each passing day, their love growing from the initial spark of attraction into something solid and enduring. He remained her fiercest defender and most enthusiastic supporter, building her shelves for her expanding collection of dried herbs and medicines, and never tiring of hearing about her latest remedies. In January, during a particularly harsh blizzard that kept everyone confined to the ranch buildings for 3 days, Harmony confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks: she was with child. When she told Quentin, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, swinging her around the kitchen before setting her down gently, suddenly concerned he might have jarred the baby. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "We're really having a baby." "Yes," she said, laughing at his enthusiasm. "Sometime in late summer, I think." Quentin dropped to his knees before her, pressing his ear to her abdomen as if he might hear the tiny heartbeat. "Hello in there," he whispered. "I'm your father and I love you already." Harmony ran her fingers through his dark hair, her heart so full it might burst. 3 years ago, she had thought herself destined to live and die alone, shunned by her community, her family's legacy forgotten. Now she was married to a man who looked at her as if she had hung the moon, living on a prosperous ranch where her skills were valued, and preparing to welcome a new life into the world. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed. Quentin looked up at her, his blue eyes shining. "You deserve every happiness, Harmony Quinn, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." Spring brought new calves to the Circle T, keeping Quentin and the ranch hands busy from dawn until dusk. Harmony's pregnancy progressed without complications, her belly growing round as the weather warmed. She continued her healing work, though Quentin insisted she limit herself to less demanding cases and allow him to help with the more physical aspects of gathering herbs and preparing remedies. In May, a telegram arrived from Kennewick that threatened their hard-won peace. Quentin's former foreman wrote that a fever had broken out in town, similar to the one that had claimed Harmony's family 3 years earlier. Already, several people had died and more were sick. The town doctor was among the ill, and they were desperate for anyone with medical knowledge. Quentin brought the telegram to Harmony with obvious reluctance. "You don't have to go back," he said firmly. "No one would expect it after how they treated you." Harmony read the message twice, her emotions churning. The people of Kennewick had shunned her, whispered behind her back, charged her extra for basic necessities, and made her life a misery for 3 years. She owed them nothing. And yet, if it's the same fever that killed my family, I might be able to help, she said slowly. I survived it. My blood might contain something that could help others fight it off. Harmony, Quentin took her hands. You're 5 months pregnant. I can't let you risk yourself or our child for people who treated you like a pariah. She met his concerned gaze steadily. I wouldn't go into the sick rooms, but I could send instructions for treatments that helped ease my symptoms when I was ill. And if Dr. Whitaker is familiar with the new research on blood serum from survivors. Quentin looked skeptical. Do you really think Whitaker would try something like that, especially if it came from you, if people are dying and he's desperate enough? Maybe. She squeezed his hands. I have to try, Quentin. Not for them, but for me. I need to know I did everything I could, or I'll always wonder if I could have saved someone's parent, someone's child. Her husband studied her face for a long moment before nodding slowly. All right. But I'm sending detailed instructions with the remedies. You're not going anywhere near Kennewick, and if Whitaker wants to try anything with your blood, he can come to Cheyenne, where a proper doctor can supervise. Harmony agreed to these terms, and together they prepared a crate of medicines, fever reducers, tinctures to ease coughing and help with sleep, and detailed instructions on keeping patients hydrated and cool. Quentin had one of the ranch hands take the supplies to the train station in Cheyenne, bound for Kennewick. 2 weeks later, they received another telegram. The outbreak was subsiding. Several more people had died, but many were recovering. Dr. Whitaker had reluctantly used Harmony's remedies when his own treatments failed and reported positive results. There was no mention of gratitude or apologies for past treatment, but Harmony hadn't expected any. At least we tried, Quentin said, setting the telegram aside. That's what matters. Harmony nodded, resting a hand on her swollen belly where their child had just kicked vigorously. Yes, that's what matters. As her due date approached in late August, Harold insisted on bringing a midwife from Cheyenne to stay at the ranch. Mrs. Abernathy was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had delivered hundreds of babies throughout Wyoming Territory. She quickly assessed Harmony's condition and pronounced her healthy and the baby well-positioned. First babies often take their time, she warned. Could be a week or more past when you expect. But the baby had other ideas. 3 days after Mrs. Abernathy's arrival, Harmony's water broke while she was picking tomatoes in the kitchen garden. Labor progressed rapidly, too rapidly for Quentin's comfort, as he paced outside the bedroom door, wincing at each of Harmony's cries. Is this normal? He demanded when Mrs. Abernathy emerged to fetch more hot water. It seems too fast. Is she all right? Some women are just efficient birthers, the midwife said with a reassuring pat on his arm. Your wife is strong and the baby's doing fine. Won't be long now. She was right. Less than 6 hours after the first contraction, Harmony gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair like his father's and eyes that, when they briefly opened, showed hints of his mother's hazel coloring. When Mrs. Abernathy finally allowed Quentin into the room, he approached the bed where Harmony lay cradling their son with a mixture of awe and trepidation. He's perfect, Harmony said softly, lifting the blanket so Quentin could see the baby's face. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs. Quentin sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out to touch the downy head with reverent fingers. He's so small. 8 pounds is hardly small, Mrs. Abernathy snorted from where she was tidying up. That's a good-sized boy you've got there. What should we call him? Harmony asked, smiling as the baby wrapped his tiny hand around Quentin's finger. What about Thomas? Quentin suggested. After Tommy Lewis, if he hadn't been bitten by that snake, I might never have seen what a remarkable woman you are. Thomas Quinn, Harmony tested the name. I like it. We could call him Thomas Harold, to honor Mr. Thompson as well. Quentin nodded. Thomas Harold Quinn it is. Young Thomas thrived, growing from a newborn to a robust infant with remarkable speed. Harold, to everyone's surprise, took to grandfatherly duties with unexpected enthusiasm, often insisting on holding the baby while Harmony prepared dinner or worked in her herb room. Never had children of my own, he explained gruffly when Quentin commented on it. Sarah and I tried, but it wasn't in the cards for us. This little fella is the closest I'll come to having a son of my son, you might say. As Thomas's first birthday approached, Harold called Quentin and Harmony into his study one evening after the baby had been put to bed. He looked older than when they'd first arrived at the Circle T, his arthritis more pronounced, his movements slower. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "I'm not getting any younger, and this place needs younger blood to keep it running right." He pushed a document across the desk. "I want to change our arrangement. Instead of a partnership with you buying me out gradually, I'm making you full partners now, with the understanding that the ranch passes completely to you when I'm gone." Quentin stared at the document. "Harold, that's incredibly generous, but it's practical," the older man interrupted. "You've brought new ideas to the Circle T, modernized operations, increased profits. And your wife," he nodded to Harmony, "has become as indispensable to this community as Sarah was, maybe more so. People respect you both." His voice grew softer. "I want to know the ranch will be in good hands, hands that care about the land and the people who work it." Harmony felt tears prick her eyes. "We're honored, Harold, truly." "No need for that," he said gruffly. "Just good business." And his voice faltered slightly. "It gives me peace knowing little Thomas will grow up here, learn the business from the ground up like I did." They signed the papers that night, and as Harold poured whiskey to celebrate ginger tea for Harmony, who suspected she might be expecting again but hadn't confirmed it yet, she reflected on the winding path that had led them here. From the darkest period of her life, bereaved, ostracized, and alone, she had found her way to this moment. Married to a man who saw her strength rather than her supposed curse, mother to a beautiful son with another child possibly on the way, and now co-owner of one of the finest ranches in the territory. The people of Kennewick had called her cursed, but Quentin had called her blessed from the beginning, and his faith in her had allowed her to reclaim her father's healing legacy and build a new life where her skills were valued rather than feared. Later that night, as they lay in bed with the moonlight streaming through the window, Harmony shared her suspicions about another baby with Quentin. His face lit up with joy as he laid a gentle hand on her stomach. "Another miracle," he murmured, "though I'm not surprised." "Everything about you is miraculous, Harmony Quinn. From the first moment I saw you standing up to that doctor in Kennewick, I knew you were special. You saw me," she said softly. "When everyone else saw only superstition and fear, you saw me, and I always will." He kissed her tenderly. "Blessed, not cursed, always blessed." 5 years later, the Circle T had grown into one of the most prosperous ranches in Wyoming. Harold Thompson had passed peacefully in his sleep 2 winters prior, leaving the ranch entirely to Quentin and Harmony as promised. They had expanded the herd, added more grazing land, and built a proper clinic in one of the outbuildings where Harmony could treat patients from the surrounding area. Thomas, now 6, had been joined by a sister, Sarah, who at 4 years old already showed signs of inheriting her mother's interest in plants and healing. Their youngest, James, had just celebrated his first birthday and was taking his first tentative steps across the ranch house floor. Harmony's reputation as a healer had spread throughout the region. What had once been whispered as a curse in Kennewick was now spoken of as a gift in Cheyenne and the surrounding communities. She had even been consulted by physicians from as far away as Denver, who recognized that her knowledge of herbal remedies complemented their more conventional treatments. Occasionally, news reached them from Kennewick. The town had grown with the arrival of the railroad, bringing new residents who knew nothing of the superstitions that had once defined Harmony's existence there. Dr. Whitaker had eventually retired, replaced by a younger doctor who, they heard, sometimes prescribed herbal remedies alongside his modern medicine's remedies, suspiciously similar to Harmony's formulations that had helped during the fever outbreak years earlier. One autumn day, as Harmony was working in her clinic, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Tommy Lewis, now a grown man of 25, his hat in his hands. "Miss Harmony," he said, then corrected himself with a smile. "Mrs. Quinn, I mean." "Tommy," she embraced him warmly. "What brings you to Cheyenne? Last we heard you were working your own spread near Kennewick." "I am," he confirmed. "Doing well, too, but I'm actually here on business buying some breeding stock and I wanted to stop by." He shifted awkwardly. "I've been meaning to come for years to thank you properly for saving my leg. My life, really." Harmony waved away his thanks. "I'm just glad you recovered fully. Quentin will be thrilled to see you. He's out with the herd but should be back for dinner. You'll stay, won't you?" Tommy accepted the invitation. And that evening, the Quinn dining room was filled with laughter as he and Quentin exchanged stories of their days working together. Thomas and Sarah were enthralled by Tommy's tales of surviving the snake bite, a story that had become something of a legend in their household. "People in Kennewick still talk about it," Tommy told the children. "How your mama saved me when the doctor wanted to cut my leg off. Some of the old-timers still cross themselves when your name comes up, Mrs. Quinn, but most folks know better now." "Do they?" Harmony asked, curious despite herself about the place that had been her home for so long. Tommy nodded. "After that fever broke out and your medicines helped, it was harder for people to hold onto the old superstitions. And then, when Mr. Quinn here sold his ranch for twice what anyone thought it was worth." He grinned. "Well, it's hard to argue someone's cursed when everything they touch turns to gold." Later, after the children were in bed and Tommy had retired to the guest room, Harmony and Quentin sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the clear Wyoming sky. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm around her, as comfortable and right as it had been from the first time he'd held her. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden into Kennewick that day with Tommy." "I'd have found you eventually," Quentin said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be." Harmony smiled at that. Once, she might have scoffed at such a sentiment, but life had taught her that some connections defied rational explanation. What else but fate could have brought this Boston-bred man to a small Wyoming town on exactly the day she ventured into the doctor's office? "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Tying yourself to a woman the whole town thought was cursed." Quentin turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Harmony Quinn, loving you has been the greatest blessing of my life. Every day I wake up beside you, I thank whatever forces brought us together." He cupped her cheek. "The only curse would have been never finding you." As their lips met in a tender kiss, Harmony felt the familiar surge of love and gratitude that had become the cornerstone of her life. The whispers of Kennewick seemed distant now, faded like an old photograph, replaced by the solid reality of the life she and Quentin had built together. She had once been called cursed by superstitious townsfolk, but Quentin had always called her blessed. And in the end, his vision of her value, her gifts, and the life they could share had proven true in ways neither of them could have imagined on that fateful day when a rattlesnake's bite brought them together. Under the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by the ranch that was their legacy and the family they had created, Harmony knew with absolute certainty that she was blessed indeed.